Jury, please be seated. State call the next witness, please.
State call Warden Todd Harris.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give in this cause will be the truth.
I do.
Thank you, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your name for the record.
Todd Harris, Toddharris.
And Warden Harris, where do you work?
I'm the senior warden at the Allen Plunge Unit in Livingston, Texas.
And is that with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice?
Yes, it is.
And how long have you been employed with TDCJ?
28 years.
Can you please tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury a little bit about your training and experience and from the start, from a CO up to the senior warden?
Okay. I started as a correctional officer January 1991 at the Ferguson Unit. Worked in building security for approximately 6 months. Went to the field force for about 3 years, working horseback, working inmates outside, gathering crops, agricultural work, landscaping, things of that nature. Promoted to sergeant in 1994, lieutenant in 1996. Worked all 3 shifts. I'm sorry.
Warden Harris, before you carry on, can you pull that mic up just a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
This booth isn't made for full-size people, so.
Okay, and so you said you made captain in 1996?
Lieutenant in 1996, and then promoted to captain at the East Ham Unit in Lovelady, Texas in 1998. Promoted to major at the East Ham Unit in 1999. Made assistant warden at the John Darrington Unit in Rocheron, Texas in 2006. Senior warden at the Clemens Unit in Brazoria, Texas in 2010. Promoted warden 2 at the Beto Unit in Tennessee Colony, 2013. And then I was asked to take over death row at the Allen Plunge Unit in Livingston, Texas in 2015.
So let's take you back to, I believe it's like 1991 or so, when you said that you were in the field force. Can you explain to them what is the field force?
Field force is separately trained officers that work horseback carrying inmates outside of the main compound and supervise them as they perform a variety of agricultural duties outside of the fence.
As a senior warden of the Polonsky unit, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about how does inmate come from Dallas County Jail or any county jail into the Texas Department of Criminal Justice system?
And inmates are received at any one of about 5 different reception units where they go through diagnostic testing and classification based upon their educational needs, based upon their treatment needs. They'll be assigned to a unit of assignment, and once received by the unit, they'll go for a unit classification committee, and we'll assign a custody based upon their institutional adjustment record and their behavior, attitude, things of that nature. Assign them a job and assign them a housing assignment, and we'll kind of orientate them into the prison system from that point.
Okay, and you said a unit classification. What is that?
It's a committee made up of a treatment representative, security representative, and a warden that chairs the committee.
Okay. And what is the purpose of that classification system?
To take a look at the classification is something that begins upon reception and never ends throughout the inmate's time incarcerated. It is done on a routine basis with regard to make sure we're meeting the inmate's needs as far as his educational and treatment needs, security needs.
I'm sorry. What are the different levels of classification that you all categorize?
The least restrictive custody we have is what was referred to as a G1 trustee. G stands for general population, level 1. And that is an outside trustee. That inmate can work outside the fence. He can be housed in a compound that doesn't necessarily have a hard perimeter. He receives periodic supervision. Those are the guys that we use for driving tractor trailer rigs, to move our commissary goods and things from unit to unit. Those are they have to be within 2 years of release. They have to have no violent crimes, no burglary, no 3G offenses of any kind in order to be an outside trustee. The next custody level down is a G2, which stands for General Population Level 2. A G2 inmate has all the same characteristics as a G1, except he has to be housed within a hard perimeter, and he cannot be outside of the hard perimeter of a facility without direct armed supervision. When he is transported, he has to be he has to go in full restraints. Next down is a G3. That's an inmate. As far as their environment, their job is just like a G2, except that they cannot have a job that allows them to have access to multiple areas of the unit on a routine basis, such as maintenance, yard squad, things of that nature. These are guys that are doing life without parole or have a sentence greater than 50 years and haven't done at least 10 years on them at that point. Next down is G4. This is a chronic rule violator, but has not yet been violent towards staff or other inmates. These guys are going to be involved in trafficking, trading, gambling, trying to brew alcohol, things of that nature. That's kind of nonviolent offenses within the institution that necessarily wouldn't get them in too much trouble. The next down from that is G5 inmate. That is the inmate that's shown recent aggression towards staff or other inmates via threats, physical assaults, fighting, things of that nature. Those inmates are going to be highly restrictive within the housing area. They don't receive any day room time, only 2 hours outside recreation. They cannot work only in the field force. Then from there, administrative segregation is the next most restrictive level, and that's inmates who their behavior or their association with the security threat group puts them in a position to where their presence in the general population is dangerous not only for them but for other inmates and staff. These are inmates that have been acting out violently, severely injured other inmates, severely injured staff, things of that nature. And that those inmates are housed single cell. They're escorted by 2 correctional officers everywhere they go while in restraints. They only receive 2 hours recreation per day. They're fed in cell. But that's the most highly secure type inmate we have.
Okay. Now, when offender comes into TDCJ, you said that you all do several tests on them to determine what unit or what specific level need they are needing. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, and do you all also look at the type of offense in which they are charged?
Yes.
Okay. In determining the person's classification, if an inmate has been to the penitentiary in another state, how does that affect you all's determination?
Obviously, we would request those records and look at the data that's collected on that offender already.
Okay. Would that information change what level status he would be once he receives into TDCJ?
Not if there's anything, so long as there's nothing out of the ordinary like involvement with a security threat group, such as the Mexican Mafia, Texas Syndicate, Aryan Brotherhood, things, those type groups. If there's no involvement such as that, wouldn't really change. We would still, each inmate's going to be treated as an individual based upon his needs.
Okay. So unless he's involved in, say, a security threat group, meaning one of the, is it 5 that you all claim?
Correct. 5 that we routinely segregate.
Okay. And what are those 5?
Texas Syndicate, Mexican Mafia, Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Circle, and Hermanos Pistoleros de Latinos.
And so if a person is not classified in any of those groups, regardless of the current offense or even being sent to the penitentiary in another state, more than likely he's still coming in as a G3.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's talk about a day in the life of a G3. What time do they normally wake up?
We start chow at 3 in the morning.
Okay. And from breakfast, how do they walk the unit around the unit?
On my facility, it's an open walkway concept. You have housing buildings that are connected by walkways that are open air, covered by an awning and fenced in on both sides. So they walk approximately 300 yards. It's set up much like a school campus would be set up, to the chow hall. And they have 20 minutes to eat. Upon entering the chow hall and receiving their food, once they eat, then they return to their housing area. They can go ahead and use the restroom, brush their teeth, get ready for the day. And if they have a job assignment, depending on what shift they're working, they get ready for work or school.
And when you say set up like a schoolyard, so does that mean that they are handcuffed and shackled walking to?
No, this is free roam.
So they can roam around freely amongst the unit?
They can go from point A to point B as freely as that's possible, but unshackled, unimpeded, unescorted. We communicate, we send them in groups and communicate via radio.
So when you say unescorted, meaning there's no guard walking alongside with them to the child?
Correct.
And you also talked about their jobs. What type of job would a G3 inmate have?
He could be a janitor on his housing area. He can be assigned to the field force, and that's pretty much it on the Pulaski unit that we have available to them.
And what about their sleeping arrangements?
They're housed two-man cells. We also have, G3s are always on cell block. We don't have a G3 dorm. We also have dorms for G2s. But G3s are going to be in a two-man cell. There's 48 men per section, and there's 3 sections in a pod. So there's about 420 inmates.
And how many guards are assigned to, I guess, watch that 420 some odd inmates?
One. Oh, there's 400 something per building, one for 140.
So there's one guard watching approximately 140 inmates at a time.
Correct.
Now, Warden Harris, you are a full-size man, as you stated. Does all your guards look like you?
No.
Okay. What is the average weight or height of a guard for TDCJ?
It's as diverse as the people in this room. As far as the average, we have around about 40% of our staff are female, 60% male. There's very few guys my size work there.
What are the requirements to be a TDCJ officer?
Have to have a high school diploma, no B misdemeanors, A misdemeanors, no felony convictions, pass the drug test, be a U.S. citizen or have a work visa, and complete a training academy.
So you're telling me that potentially somebody who's probably not old enough to buy alcohol legally can come in and supervise offenders serving life without parole?
We have some people right out of high school that come to work for us.
Now, you said that they are on a cell block. How does the doors open and close?
They're controlled from an electric release that is from a central picket that watches all 3 sections. And when the officer calls for the doors to be rolled, they're electronically released.
Who's in charge of closing those doors?
The staff. The inmates will oftentimes shut their own, and we get an indicator light, the picket saying it's closed. But staff will routinely, as they open and clear the run, staff will move down the run, making sure the doors are secured.
From your training and experience, have those doors been able to be manipulated?
Yes.
Okay. And how does inmates tend to do that?
Because it's a hook latch, if they can start stuffing paper a little at a time up in there, it can raise it looks like basically a bird beak that falls over a catch pin. If they can stick enough paper up in there, they can create enough space to where if they rattle the door enough, you can get to pop up. They can work on the edge of the door and get it to kick out over time. If you can do enough damage and get enough wear going, you can eventually get that door out. Usually we find the damage before, either we find the damage after it's too late or before they get to that point, but normally we're able to detect that. Those systems have gotten better over time. We've figured out how to shore them up and make them better.
Okay. And when generally, what would be the reason or that an inmate would want to pop his own door? What kind of activities that they're doing?
No, just a number of things. Trafficking, trading, engaging in homosexual behavior with other inmates, assaulting other inmates, stealing from other inmates. The varieties, there's a lot of variety there.
Now, you talked about, you have one officer in, I guess, the picket and one officer on the run. And is the day room attached to the run, to the cell unit?
It is.
Okay. And how many people are in a day room at a time, or what's the maximum capacity?
48 per section.
48 inmates per section in the day room?
Mm-hmm.
And so is that one officer that's on the run also has to watch the day room?
Correct.
Okay. Is it fair to say that they probably miss some things that
Yes.
happens? Okay. Because in the day room, when they're in there, it's kind of like watching TV in the living room, right?
Correct.
Okay, and they can sit by each other, they can have conversations. If they wanted to, devise a plan to do some illegal activity, that's probably one of the better places to do such.
Yes, it is.
Okay. What about outside recreation? How does that work?
We run several rec periods per day on the outside yard. We have one officer in a gas picket. Basically, it's an elevated platform where he has chemical agents in the form of that he shoots via a 37 millimeter gas gun or throwing grenades.
I'm sorry?
That they shoot via a 37 millimeter gas gun.
And then, so you have one in the picket, and then you have one, I guess, letting them in and out the rec yard?
From the building, but nobody on the yard.
Oh, so there's no one on the yard with them?
No one but the officer in the gas picket.
And what is the maximum capacity of the outside rec?
About 320.
So you have 320, possibly up to 320 inmates outside recreation. What kind of activities are available for outside recreation?
We have basketball, handball, weights, and a lot of them run the perimeter of the yard. It's about a quarter mile.
And so you have only one officer from the elevated stands looking down at possibly 300 and some odd inmates?
Correct.
Okay, so that's another place where you probably get a lot of scheming and plan devising going on
Correct.
in there. What about church service? How does that work?
We have, we're blessed to have lots of religious volunteers that come in and assist our chaplaincy program. We run three primary services per week, and then we have some additional Bible studies that are facilitated by different volunteer groups.
And so when you are running church services, what is the maximum, what's the largest number of people?
About 200 at a time. We'll run several services, but about 200 at a time.
So about 200 at a time. And I guess a recreation and church service is very popular events on the unit?
Yes.
Okay. Is that because generally you get to see some of your friends or inmates on other ends of the unit that you normally don't get to see?
Correct.
Okay. And so a lot of times they're using it as a social hour versus what it's intended to be?
Oftentimes, yes.
Now I want to clarify something. When you said that a G3 offender is someone that's serving life without parole or someone receiving more than a 50-year sentence?
That has less than 10 years done on a 50-year sentence
Okay.
or more.
And so could that be, for instance, a DWI repeat offender that's serving a life sentence?
Yes.
Okay. And so there's no separation between DWI repeat offender or capital murder?
No.
Those two individuals can be housed in the same, I guess, in the same cell?
Correct.
Now let's talk a little bit about, you said that you have 40% female and 60% male on your unit.
Correct.
Okay. What is the total number of offenders right now in TDCJ?
System-wide, just under 150,000.
And how many do you have on the Florence unit?
My capacity is 2,984. My current count is 2,872.
And how many of those inmates are serving life without parole?
88 on my unit, and there's 1,147 system-wide.
1,147?
system-wide.
And what about death row? How many offenders do you have on death row?
220?
And so the Pulaski unit actually houses the death row inmates, correct?
Correct.
Okay. This is not the facility in which the sentences are carried out, it's just where they are housed.
Correct. All but the female. Females are housed on Mountain View. There's 6, I think, female on death row.
The house where?
Mountain View unit?
On the Mountain View unit?
Mhm.
And you said 6 female death row
Correct.
offenders right now? From your training and experience and your time with TDCJ, have there ever been issues with female offenders, or I'm sorry, female officers assisting male offenders in bringing in contraband?
Yes.
Have there ever been issues with male officers assisting offenders in bringing in contraband?
Yes.
What are some of the other ways outside of the officers, offenders are gaining access to contraband within the units?
Through contact visitation is a big way that things are brought in. Person's secrets, contraband on their body where it can't be detected, so long as it's not a metal object that would alert us that doesn't belong there. But drugs, things of that nature that are organic and substance in nature that can be easily concealed on the body or in the body, and balloons passed orally through contact visitation, the inmate then passes it later on. Also, the few inmates that we have that work outside will hide things in different orifices of their bodies as well, and that will it enables them to defeat the strip search process.
Okay. And you said balloons. Can you explain to them, the jury, what do you mean about balloons? What do folks do with the balloons and the drugs?
Basically, they take drugs, put them in latex balloons. They hide them on their body. Upon coming through once they get through the search point, they go to a restroom, retrieve them from wherever they have them secreted, place them in their mouth. They're allowed to embrace and kiss upon the beginning and the end of the visit. So when they kiss, they pass the drugs mouth to mouth. The inmate swallows it, and then he passes it through his feces and retrieves the drugs from that point.
Now, the jury was educated a little bit earlier about the dime bags of marijuana. It's worth generally $10 street value. Now, inside of the prison system, is that contraband, is that market tripled?
It's exponentially higher, yes.
Yes. Okay. For instance, cell phones are contraband.
Correct.
Okay. Are y'all having a lot of problems with cell phones right now?
Thankfully, not at this time. We're not having a lot of trouble at this moment, but we have in the past.
Okay. And how much is a cell phone worth inside of a prison?
Our standard little flip phone burner that you would get at the dollar store, prepaid, would be probably $500 to $600. A smartphone would be over $1,000.
And offenders and inmates, they're not allowed to have $1,000 cash on them. So how is that money paid out?
Through trafficking and trading, or allowing, getting their families to send money from one group to another or put money on a different inmate's account. And then also in goods, sometimes sexual favors, also could be payment for attacking someone, something of that nature.
And you said payment for attacking someone. Is that something that you've experienced
Yes.
in the course of years in working for TDCJ?
Yes.
And offenders can solicit or hire someone to do their dirty work
Yes.
if they wanted to.
Yes.
What about illegal tattooing? Do y'all have that issue as well?
Yes, ma'am.
What are they using to make these illegal tattoo guns? Do you know?
Yes, they use a fan motor, solenoid from a fan motor. it basically turns at a high rate of speed. They'll attach a small arm of it, use the tube of a standard ink pen. For a needle, they'll use a staple, straighten that out, attach it. Most of this is done by heating stuff up and melting it together. And then, of course, they plug it in. The motor starts to rotate, has that small arm, so it causes a back and forth motion. They dip that into ink and then apply it to the skin. The pattern's usually done on paper, either with pencil or ink pen. You can take speed stick, anything that has an alcohol base, rub it on the skin, lay it flat to the skin. It'll transfer that pattern onto the body, and they use that to go by and do a tattoo, complete tattoo.
And you say they are burning all of these metal objects. How they're burning, with a hot plate?
They'll short out the electrical socket, cross wires. Usually it's plastic that's been melted together, but attached to the steel components of the little motor. But they'll short out our electricity, cross it, take pencil lead, stick it in there, that heats up, the graphite heats up, they'll get that hot. They'll rewire their hot pot to get it to where it gets at a higher temperature. They're very ingenious. Most anything man can do, man can undo, and vice versa. So they find ways to get what they want done.
We talk about cell phones, we talk a little bit about drugs. Are there any other types of contraband that you all find on the unit?
The variety is endless. Jewelry, food, alcohol, drugs, cell phones. Those are the most expensive and most desired ones, obviously.
Do the offenders sometimes make shanks or weapons?
Absolutely.
Okay, and generally, what do they use to make those shanks?
Again, you can take disposable razors. They'll take the actual razor blades out of them. You get enough of them, you bind them together with string so that they become rigid instead of flexible. Lash that to the end of the razor. It makes a good slashing instrument. Their toilets are stainless steel. There's a copper rod that runs from the button back to the diaphragm that actually releases the pressure to flush the commode. They can break apart the toilet mechanism, pull that rod out. That makes a very good ice pick type shank. Any flat piece of metal that they can get their hands on, they'll break apart pieces of the bunk, they'll break apart pieces of the door, expanded metal wire screening, the fencing material, anything they can get their hands on.
And you talked a little bit about sexual favors. Do you all, have you in the past had any issue with prostitution within the prison system?
Yes.
And then the facility that the Pulaski unit is, that is a male maximum security facility?
Correct.
Okay. And so even amongst all male offenders, there is sometimes still prostitution going on?
Yes.
And you told the jury a little bit about administrative segregation when you went through the overview. Let's slow down and talk about how they are fed and how they exported. So let's start with how they are fed and how they enter and remove from their cell.
Okay. The inmates are fed in cell through what's called a meal slot. It's basically a steel hatch on the door that when their trays are made in advance in the kitchen on 12 building, which is a segregation unit on the Pulaski unit, and delivered hot cell side. The inmates are told to face the rear of the cell or to back up or sit on the bunk. Then the officer will pop the slot, lay the tray up there. Officer will step away, allow the inmate to advance, retrieve the tray. He has to pull his tray and back up, and the officer will secure the slot and move there. That's how they're fed. Same thing, the tray is retrieved in the same fashion. As far as the way they are escorted, is that where you wanted me to go?
I was going to ask, how big is the slot?
It's approximately 18 inches by 6 inches tall.
Okay. And how are they escorted?
All segregation and death row inmates are going to be what's called double escorted. I mean, there's going to be at least 2 officers present And before they are removed from a secure area, they must be strip searched and then hand restraints applied behind their back. Unless they have some type of physical impairment that precludes that, then they'll be cuffed in front with the use of a restraint belt. Once the strip search is completed and the restraints are applied, they are ordered to face the rear of the cell. The door will be called to be opened. The officer opens the door. The inmate is told to back out, at which point the officer takes a hand and places it on his arm, and they take control of him, and it's what's called a hands-on escort everywhere he goes. So if he pulls away, tries to turn, the officer should have his hand on him in order to control his body and his movement. And they go that way everywhere they go, be it visitation, be it recreation, be it the medical department, dentist, wherever they go that way.
How do they receive rec? How long is their rec?
2 hours per day is what they receive.
And what are they doing the other 22 hours?
They're in their cell.
So they eat in the cell, only time to come out. What about showers? How are they showering?
They go to a shower cell. That takes about 5 to 10 minutes. They're placed into an individual secure cell where they're allowed to shower. The only other thing they get is legal and personal visits, and those visits usually last 2 hours, and they get 1 hour, one visit per week. Attorney visits can be as much as needed based upon the attorney's need and the inmate's need.
I don't think we talked about this, but in general population, how are they showering?
We have different shower cells on that's free access to it. Basically, it's a single shower cell, like a stall, and they receive their necessities daily, so they get a towel and change of clothes, socks, underwear, and then at their leisure, when they're not working, they can go shower during dayroom time.
What about toiletries? Do you all provide toiletries?
We provide toilet paper. Inmates can buy toothpaste, and we also provide toothpaste and toothbrush. Anything that if they're indigent, we supply it. Or even if they request it, they don't even have to be indigent, we'll supply it.
And if you're indigent, then that means you can't afford to go to commissary, is that correct?
Correct.
A part of this bartering and trade system that goes on within TDCJ, is commissary a big factor in that?
Absolutely. It's the main thing.
It's the main factor?
Mm-hmm. The main item that is traded,
Okay.
main commodity.
And so, I guess, when they are bargaining or brokering deals, it's either for commissary or some type of other contract,
Or favor.
or sexual favor, or other type of favor.
Correct.
Do you all have a lot of gambling going on there?
Unfortunately, yes, we do.
It's football season, so
It's very busy.
it's a very busy season for gambling. And what do you all do when you catch someone gambling, or like you say, those lower non-violent infractions?
They'll receive a disciplinary case, they'll go to court, they'll receive commissary restriction, rec restriction. If they can't prove where they received their commissary from, we confiscate it. In other words, we compare their purchase receipts against what they have, and then we take what's in excess, and then we'll store that away, and we'll give that to inmates who are in need or whatever the case may be.
And so what type of items that can they purchase in commissary?
It's basically like the corner store as far as a convenience store, except it's all institutional friendly packaging as far as we don't sell cans of tuna. It comes in a foil pack because the cans can be used as a weapon. The only can we sell is canned soda water, Dr. Pepper, Sprite, things of that nature. Everything else is in a foil pack or clear packaging. They can buy a typewriter, fan, radio, shoes. Ramen noodles is big, always very big. It stretches everything. Jerky, candy, ice cream. It's pretty much anything you could get at a convenience store.
The Roman noodles are big because they like to make the spreads, right?
Correct.
And they can share them while watching the football.
Correct.
Is staff assault an issue on your unit right now?
Thankfully, not a big issue at this time.
And is that something that has occurred in the past?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the inmate by the name of Hector Medina.
Oh, yes.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about Hector Medina?
I want to object to going into any particular individual that has no relation to this case. I mean, they're just going to go start going through and picking out people who have done bad things in the prison who will be here for a year. I mean, there's no relevance to whatever she's about to go into this case whatsoever.
Your Honor, the relatives would be that Mr. Medina was an inmate at the Dallas County Jail who had no jail.
If we're going to.
Okay, all right. Go ahead and approach the bench.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Warden Harris, now, that particular offender has had several violations while on death row.
Excuse me, Judge, I believe we just had a ruling on that issue.
Now, Warden Harris, in general, how many people are currently on death row in your unit right now?
220?
220 offenders.
Correct.
And they are in their cell 22 hours a day?
For the most part, yes, unless they're out for visitation or recreation.
And have you had any major issues with any of those 220 some odd inmates on death row?
Yes.
And those, what type of infractions were those?
Staff assault is probably the biggest one that we have issues with from time to time, as far as the most dangerous to our staff. Trying to spear our correctional staff, shooting darts, making darts. They fashion darts out of any number of items. We used to sell the pliable earplugs, and so that inmates, if other inmates were being loud, they could stick them in their ears and be able to rest a little more easy. They'd take that, fashion a needle, stick it into it, make a blow tube, and like a blow dart, and dart our officers in the face, neck, anywhere that wasn't protected.
What about for what we would refer to as chunking?
Chunking as well, yes. That's when the inmate takes liquid substance or liquid and fecal matter substance and slings it out of the cell onto correctional staff.
So even on death row, you still tend to have some violent and non-violent infractions by inmates.
Correct. Yeah.
What punishment is given to those inmates?
Within the segregation environment in death row, there's 3 levels of death row: D1, D2, D3. D1 are death row inmates who have not recently been aggressive towards staff or had any rule infractions. They're basically behaving themselves and doing time. D2s are, again, inmates who are may have had some recent issues. They may be on their way back up to D1, or they may have not done something so severe or violent that they're a D3. A D3 inmate is the inmate who showed recent aggression within the last 30 days. He's assaulted staff, threatened staff, chunked at staff, attempted to assault staff, attempted to harm other inmates, something of that nature, something violent and aggressive that causes his movements to be even more restrictive. That inmate will get less recreation and less privileges, less visits, and also less recreation. 1 hour, 3 days per week is all he will get, in order to limit his ability to harm staff, to limit his interaction with other inmates, and that's done. They're reviewed every 30 days, and so long as they cease the disruptive behavior, they can move back up to a D2, and then to a D1. in about 90-day period of time, they can be right back where they were as far as the most privileges that are allowed.
Now, an inmate serving life without parole in general population, do they have many incentives?
Yes, they want to, of course, during that kind of time, they want to have access to commissary, be able to work, things of that nature. Are you talking about incentives to behave or
Yes, incentives to behave.
and maintain some type of modicum of freedom in order to do their time as comfortably as possible?
Okay. Which it's fair to say that because they're never going to be released from TCJ, that they are probably considered a high risk.
They're a high risk for flight and staff assault always. That's why we classify them separately. We're always going to be concerned that they might try to become instantly aggressive and escape because they're not getting out. They have every reason to try to leave if given the opportunity.
When an offender is transferred from a county jail to TDC, does his jail infractions follow him?
Yes.
And what if he has no jail infractions?
Then that'd be, as far as the classification process, I would say it was a good report from Dallas County Jail or a good report from Harris County Jail or wherever he's coming from.
And from your time over 20 plus odd years with TDCJ, does that always indicate what that person's going to be like once they get to TDC?
It just tells us how he is at that time. There's no crystal ball that's going to give us any insight into how the inmate's going to adjust to life in prison. That's why the classification process starts at the beginning and never ends, is because it's very reactive to the inmate's behavior.
And if an offender is coming from Dallas County Jail with no incidents or infractions, is it possible that they have an incentive not to have any incidents or infractions awaiting trial?
Oh, absolutely.
And then once they get to TDC, after they receive their sentence, it's possible that their attitude could change.
Yes.
And have you seen it where the person had no infractions in the county jail and then became an inmate at TDCJ and became a terrible offender?
Yes.
Is that something that happens often?
I wouldn't say it. In the realm of, yes, it happens. It's a concern all the time.
And from your experience, even when he's being placed on death row, is that something that has occurred?
Even when, I'm sorry.
Even when a person is being placed on death row and had no infractions in the Dallas County Jail, is that something, and get to TDC, he can still become, I guess, a terrible inmate?
He can become violent, yes.
And have you seen that?
Yes.
And how often has that occurred?
In the 3 years I've been dealing with almost 4 years dealing with the death row population, I would say probably 3% of the time.
That's a witness.
Mr. Harris, my name is Paul Johnson. I have a few questions for you. You described your career with the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and you are here today in what capacity?
To offer insight into what prison life is for a G3 inmate versus death row inmate, from my understanding.
Okay, and have you been doing this often, or do you often go and testify to jurors to give them a glimpse into what prison life might be like?
I think I've offered testimony like this on three different occasions.
And this is the third, is that correct?
I believe so.
Okay, and so prior to you, there was another warden that went around and basically did the same thing that you're doing, just coming in and trying to give the jury a glimpse of the possible bad things that can occur in a penitentiary setting. Is that right?
Yes.
And the prosecutor's asking you questions here about how often things can happen, and if something is possible that it could happen, and you say, yes, I've seen it. And a moment ago, you actually threw out a statistic of about 3%. Where does that statistic come from, sir?
Just my reflection upon dealing with that. Of the 220 inmates, how often I've seen one come in and become violent without cause.
And that's a reflection? I mean, that's just a reflection? That's
a reflection in the last 4 years, yes.
I mean, you're familiar with ECAC reports, are you not? Mm-hmm. I mean, have you had an opportunity to I mean, I want to talk to you, we'll get back to this in just a moment, but I want to talk to you about something, because the prosecution here today, would you not agree with me, has sat there and pulled out the entire litany of anything and everything that could possibly be scary to someone that might be sitting on a jury trying to get an understanding of what prison life is like. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't offer that opinion.
Well, she's talking to you about contraband, possible escape, possible sexual assault, possible trading favors, possible phones, possible assaults, possible staff assault, possible inmate assault. She's talked to you about all those things, hasn't she?
Yes.
And in fact, would you not agree with me, sir, that, I mean, you're a senior warden now, correct?
Correct.
And I would assume that as a senior warden, you undertake it upon yourself to familiarize yourself with all the recent trends in law enforcement and corrections, do you not?
I mainly concentrate on my unit.
Well, I mean, sir, and in concentrating on your unit, I mean, you yourself even have to undergo yearly continuing education and training to keep your certification.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And are you telling me that you don't undertake, or are you a reader of journals involving corrections?
Yes.
Okay. And when I talk about journals involving corrections, what types of things might you see in a journal for the correctional institute people, the wardens? What kind of things do you read about? What kind of things do you study to help you on your daily basis?
Different programmings, what's been successful, different security systems that have been successful elsewhere. You also read about things that went wrong and try to learn from other people's mistakes.
Okay, and you also learn about things that go right, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And if we stop for just a moment and back up for just a moment, because even as the prosecutor said to you just a moment ago, you are on the Pulaski unit, and that's the big scary unit in Texas, is it not?
I wouldn't characterize it that way.
I know you wouldn't characterize it that way, because in fact, it's just not a big scary place, is it?
Not to me, it's not.
And sir, but see, to these folks over here that are jurors, and you understand why you're here today, correct?
Yes.
This jury has found this man guilty of a capital offense, and they have 2 questions. Are you familiar with that, the process?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the questions?
The questions are what you asked me. So.
No, are you familiar with the questions that these folks are going to be concerned with?
Yes.
And the first question being what, if you can recall? Do you understand that the first issue this jury's got to decide is whether or not it's in all probability the defendant will probably continue to commit criminal acts of violence on a continuous basis, if not given the death penalty. You familiar with that?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. That is a misstatement of the law.
You just agreed with it.
Your Honor, I think this witness is not here to inform the jury about the law.
State the issue again, please.
Okay, so would you agree with me, Warden, that if the state can make the prison system appear to be something that it's not, it might cause them to be thinking of the prison system in such a way to cause emotion rather than facts to guide their decision regarding that question. Would you agree with that being a possibility if you sit there and ask the questions in such a way that's scary and that the prison system just seems to be a scary, horrible place?
Are you asking me to speculate on what
Yeah.
someone might think?
Well, I'm asking you, sir, I mean, you understand, I mean, you don't get called down here to testify by the defendants in cases, do you?
Sometimes, yes.
Well, you've only done it 3 times.
Well, in a capital trial, I've only done it 3 times, yes, sir.
Yeah, and you've never done so at the request of a defendant, have you?
Not in a capital trial, no.
Okay, and because the capital cases is unlike any other case, we're talking about dealing with situations where the questions revolve how safe are the penitentiaries. And not only how safe the penitentiaries are, but the misconceptions that jurors have regarding levels of violent behavior by people in the prisons. Are you aware of that?
Yes.
Okay, and so would you not agree with me that all through the state's testimony or questioning of you a while ago, they focused on everything that might cause a typical person sitting over there in a jury that doesn't work in the penitentiary, that doesn't work in the legal community, that doesn't have any experience in these areas? It kind of presents a situation where you paint the picture that everybody walking around in the penitentiary is either looking to hurt somebody, about to hurt somebody, or involved in some kind of criminal enterprise. And that's just, in fact, not right, is it?
Not everyone is, no.
In fact, sir, prisons are, the Texas Department of Corrections runs a very safe prison environment, does it not?
We do the best we can, yes, sir.
Okay, well, that's not really the answer to my question, sir. That's kind of stepping back and not being just coming out and telling these folks what the truth is. And the truth of the matter is, there is an extremely low rate of violence in the Texas Department of Corrections, aren't there?
It's not horrible, that's for sure. I don't know what your estimation of low is.
Well, sir, low.
If you're on the Ferguson unit, there's a high level of violence. If you're on the Ferguson unit, there's a high level of violence. If you're on
what's different about the Ferguson unit?
younger inmates.
Okay, and I want to get to that, okay, because one of the things when we talked about these studies that are done, the things that I would assume that you've been reading about in these journals, in your continuing education, we know certain things for fact that go into the decision making and the classification placements of inmates, don't we? And tell this jury, number one, what is the leading correlative factor regarding reduced violence by any inmate in the system?
Age 30.
Age 30. And tell the jury what we're talking about.
The likelihood of inmates above the age 30 are not as spontaneous.
Inmates, okay, and so this is your testimony to these folks right here in this courtroom now, and we'll get back to all the scary stuff in a little while. But I want to talk to you about some of the other, I want to talk to you about the realities. And we know as a reality that number one, even an inmate that's been in prison before the age of 30, once they attain the age of 30, their propensity and likelihood for committing any criminal act in a penitentiary drops dramatically, does it not?
At age 30.
At age 30. In fact, at age 39 and above, it's almost non-existent, isn't it?
Pretty close.
And now let's talk about an inmate that's going to arrive at the penitentiary at the age of 34. We know going into it that the most predictive factor regarding that individual is that because of his age, he is on an extremely low level for propensity to either have disciplinary infractions or violent infractions. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
Okay. And that's just a fact. I mean, and you remember the prosecutor kept saying, well, it's possible that someone could come down there and not have any jail problems or anything, but come down and become a terrible person. You remember that question?
Yes.
What do you think she meant by a terrible person?
A violent individual?
Okay. And so when she asked you that question, did you think she was asking you if it was possible that could occur or if it was probable that would occur?
It's possible.
Okay, do you understand the difference between the word possible and the word probable, don't you?
Correct.
And the word probable is what permeates the criminal justice system and the Texas Department of Corrections all the way from the time an inmate hits, once they're transferred from their county of conviction, the probabilities of that person being a problem or a threat in your facility is the paramount consideration every step of the level, isn't it?
Correct.
And it is reviewed every single month, is it not?
Talk about this classification?
No, well, some offenders' classifications are reviewed monthly, are they not?
Segregation inmates are.
Yes, sir. Other inmates, as long as there's no problem whatsoever, they're reviewed, what, yearly?
Annually.
Annually. And in fact, based upon the amount of inmates, you're talking about right now, the system has currently about 150,000 inmates. And as I said earlier, the rate of violence per capita to that population of inmates is so low that there are not really, there's not a correlation between the fact that you've got 150,000 people that are all convicted criminals being in the same location, interacting with each other daily, and the level of violence is so much dramatically lower than people might expect that it's almost surprising, isn't it? Even to a correctional officer.
Surprising? Yep. Are you asking me, am I surprised?
Well, even as a correctional officer, wouldn't you agree with me that the fact that you could take 150,000 people that are convicted of crimes serious enough to be going to the penitentiary, and you could put them all in the same place and have such a low amount of violence?
There's a reason for it.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about those reasons, okay? We're going to skip off the scary, and we're going to talk now about reality. And the reality is, going back to what we started talking about a moment ago, Texas Department of Corrections runs one of the finest prison systems in this nation, doesn't it?
Yes.
There is no question about that, is there?
Nope.
You guys have got down there, you've got, what have you got now, 50,000 guards? Or
37,
37?
I believe 37,000.
37,000 guards, 60% approximate male, 40% female guards, correct?
Correct.
And you described it a while ago, or the prosecutor said, God, you could take a fella that ain't even old enough to buy a beer and stick him down there in the midst of all these bad folks. You remember that question?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, that's kind of scary, isn't it? No, it's not scary at all, is it?
It was when I was 21, I can tell you that.
But the perception.
I understand what you're saying, but
Well, and sir, that's what I want to do. You understand exactly what I'm saying, but these folks don't. And I want to make sure that when we're finished talking, these people's perception has gone from scary to reality. And that's what your perception, that's the change of your perception on what. I mean, when you got there, it's like, oh my God, where am I at? And then once you get in there, it's just not what people think, is it?
you get accustomed to you get accustomed to it. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
and you get accustomed to it, sir, because when you get in there and start working, you find out that it's just not full of all the boogeymen that everybody, the jury and everybody out here in this audience, they might be thinking that, but the truth is, the guards, before they set foot in that prison system, they are extensively trained, are they not?
Yes, sir.
Well, I mean,
As much as possible as you can train for that environment. Yes.
And you certainly are not putting somebody in a prison until they have sufficient training.
Correct.
And that training is something that's reviewed constantly,
Yes.
updated constantly.
Yes.
It is, every guard is required to undergo a full week of continual training on a yearly, annual basis, are they not?
They are.
And so we're talking about a staff that, number one, is trained, and it's not the highest paying job in the world, but it's a well-paying job, is it not?
You can make it's a working wage. It's a living
It's
wage.
a working wage, benefits, vacations, retirement, insurance.
Yes.
Sir, it's considered to be a good job, isn't it?
I think so.
Yes, sir. And you're proud of the work you do, aren't you?
Yes, sir.
And when you come down here and you're proud of the work that you do on a daily basis, and you're proud of the system that you work for, is it not counterintuitive to come in here in front of a jury that really doesn't understand the prison system and try to make it sound worse than it really is?
I'm trying to answer the questions you're asking me and that she's asking me.
Well, I know, but see, it seems like the answers, when I ask the same question she asked, but I use different words, I'm getting different words out of your mouth too. And the truth sounds the truth all the time, don't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so going back to the reality versus scary, we've got a situation that where we start off, we have a dedicated, well-trained staff of people that are down there, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those folks are down there, and many like yourself have worked their ways up through the system, through the years, and have gone through and blossomed in that environment, promoted through that environment, and taken on positions of responsibility in that environment, and have gone on to retire from that environment, have they not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we have a staff that is trained, that is well-trained to deal with people. Let's talk about the facility itself. Let's talk about the Texas Department of Corrections facilities. Okay? There are several different types of correctional facilities themselves, are there not?
There are.
Okay? And they go anywhere from, are there still any privately run facilities?
Yes.
Okay, and by that, we're talking about very low-risk inmates who are basically sent to a unit run by a for-profit company, correct?
Correct.
And they have their own guards, they have their own, that has no relation really to what we're dealing with today, correct?
Correct.
But then from that unit, which is really not even affiliated, other than it's a hired by y'all, you go to state jail facilities.
Yes.
Do y'all supervise those also?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and those are for the lowest classification of a felony offense, correct?
Correct.
Okay. You're not involved in that. You have no state jail prisoners on your
No, sir.
facility. So then we have what's known as minimum security facilities.
Correct.
You have medium security, maximum.
Correct.
And is that what you would describe the Pulaski unit as?
Pulaski unit is maximum. It's a level 5 facility.
Okay. And in this unit, that's what we're basically talking about. When we're talking about, for purposes of their decision, the environment that this defendant would be into, and going into, and living his life in, if he received a sentence of life without parole. And you said that you currently house 88 of those prisoners in your facility.
Correct.
Now, maximum security units. You have described for the prosecutor basically a situation where it's almost being like on a junior high school campus where you just walk around and do whatever you want to. And that's not the way it is.
It's controlled movements.
And you just used the word control. Everything that takes place in a prison facility is controlled, is it not?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's not the way it sounded when she asked it. It was like, oh, they get to just walk around and go here, to go there, do what they want to do. But in fact, every time you go from one place to another, even though you may be walking by your own volition, and you don't have a guard escorting you, someone knows where you're leaving, someone knows where you're supposed to show up, correct?
Correct.
Control. There's a sense of control there that everybody is aware of, and it permeates the entire existence of an inmate in that unit, does it not?
It should.
But would you agree with me when the prosecutor talked to you about that? It kind of sounded, these folks over here, that they just walking around, and if they want to just start going crazy, they're just free to do so.
It is possible for that to happen, but yeah, I understand what you're saying, yes.
And you understand what I'm asking. You understand what I'm asking you about is the difference between possibility and probability. And we know that it doesn't happen, or it happens in such extreme cases because the unit itself has the ability through classification to control inmates who are going to be a problem, don't you?
It reacts to their behavior, yes.
Yes. Going back to the facility itself, it's not, everybody has a key to the gate, everybody walks around and goes wherever they want. Totally controlled environment. It's an environment that consists of concrete and steel bars in it, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's not flowers on the wall, it's concrete and steel bars where if you go from your bunk cell to get breakfast, you got 20 minutes to be there and someone's going to be looking for you 20 minutes later. Isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Everything's controlled. Every activity an inmate takes. If they're cut out to go to work duty, They've got a time to get to work duty, don't they?
They're escorted.
But they have a time to get there, and if they don't turn out to work, tell the jury what happens.
They receive a disciplinary case.
They receive disciplinary. And so when we're talking about disciplinaries, I don't know if that was brought up, but these disciplinaries can be, could you give the jury definitions or some examples of different types of disciplinaries?
Possession of contraband, refusing to work, refusing to obey orders, assaulting another inmate, assaulting staff, trafficking, trading.
Talking back?
Nope.
Disrespectful?
Use of indecent and vulgar language, 42, as 1142.
Okay. When you included in your examples of disciplinary, you talked about assault today. Those are all major disciplinaries, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay. And there's a pretty big distinction between major disciplinaries and minor disciplinaries. Is that right?
The amount of punishment they receive.
Absolutely. Okay. So remember earlier when the prosecutor asked you, she said there's not really much incentive for a person serving life without parole. There's not much incentive for them to act right. You said, no, there's a lot of incentives for those people to act right. You remember that question?
Mm-hmm.
And then she said, well, no, but the fact that they're not going to get out of jail, that gives them a real high potential to maybe want to act wrong. And you remember, you actually answered that question. Yeah, it could do that. You remember that?
I said we're always going to be concerned because they're going to be a flight risk.
Okay. And sir, in fact, which is going to be the most counterintuitive thing said here in this courtroom today, is that you know, as an absolute fact, as you sit here today and testify, that a person in prison for life without parole has zero greater propensity for violence than an inmate in prison for any other offense, don't you?
There's no other, no, it's not, there's not a greater propensity based upon offense or sentence.
Okay, now, and I want to make sure, I think I botched up the question, so I'm going to ask you again, just to make sure that you understood it, and that they understand it. When a person comes to the Texas Department of Corrections on a sentence of life without parole, and the only way you can get that is for capital murder, correct?
Correct.
That person has absolutely no more of a propensity to commit a violent act in prison than any other inmate there for any other offense, does he?
No, sir.
Okay? So, this scary stuff, I mean, and this, I'm not making this up, because you know it to be facts, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And so now, I'm just asking you a question from one guy to the next, okay? I'm not a lawyer, you're not the warden. That wouldn't sound right, would it? I mean, wouldn't you kind of think that if someone committed capital murder, they're automatically just going to be a scary fellow wherever they're at? I mean, that's kind of what you'd kind of just tend to think, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and see, these folks ain't the warden, and these folks ain't the lawyer. They don't deal with real life in this system. But you do, and you're here today to tell them that no matter what crime was committed by the person that came down there convicted of capital murder, he is statistically no greater of a risk than someone down there. Remember the prosecutor said could be somebody down there doing a DWI. Remember that?
Yes.
Could be someone down there for being a thief. Could be, couldn't it?
Yes.
And that person that committed theft may be the highest person likely to commit violence out of everybody. Is that right?
It's possible. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And the thing is, when we're talking about probabilities as opposed to possibilities, you would agree when I use the word counterintuitive that would be the very top of the chart. That people are just think that if you did a horrible crime, you're just automatically going to be a risk down there. But you know, and everybody in the system knows that that's not true, is it?
No, sir.
Okay, and let's talk about that a little bit more. So now we have a situation that instead of being the old scary boogie-boo thing, we're talking about a brick, concrete, steel environment. And a person convicted and given life without parole is going to never, ever, under any possibility, ever be classified any higher than a G3, is he?
After 10 years, he could get a modification, but it won't be to a G2. No, G3 is going to, it's the same level, it's just difference in job assignments.
G3 forever. Okay, and so that these folks understand, sometimes when you see these, a show about prison or a movie, in fact, you discussed G1s. G1s don't even have to live in the prison walls, do they?
No, sir.
I mean, so we're talking about, we have inmates in the Texas Department of Corrections that don't even live in prison. They don't work in the prison. They work for the prisons.
They don't live or work inside the secure compound.
We got, and so, I mean, if you're talking about having the greater opportunities or availabilities to do something, those would be the folks that would have those greatest opportunities, right?
Correct.
And we know that they have no more propensity to commit violence or in disciplinary infractions than any other inmate, do they?
No, sir.
Going to a G2, those inmates, those people they're in perimeter. They're in perimeter inmates, is that right?
Correct.
And so they're basically have the same freedoms as a G1, but they can't do it without an armed escort if they're outside the prison wall, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. But when we're talking about G3s, when we're talking about G3s and people serving life without parole, they're never going to be in perimeter or out of perimeter inmates. They're always going to be housed to a cell, typically with other G3 inmates. Is that right?
Correct.
And they're not allowed the same kind of work environment that the other G3s are. They can't work a maintenance crew going from building to building.
Correct. They can't work any job that gives them access to multiple areas of the facility.
So we don't have a situation, so now when we're talking about controls, we're talking about being controlled by a well-trained staff in a steel and concrete building. We have further limitations on that person, and those are done to do what, sir? To ensure the safety of the facility?
There's higher security concerns around them in order to try to keep something bad from happening.
But we already know going into it that they are just as least likely to offend as anybody else, right?
In their current custody, yes, they're no more likely.
Yes. You talked about classification. I'm not going to keep beating the horse up about how y'all do it, but as you go down to G4 or G5, all the way up to ADSA, the Texas Department of Corrections has ample methods of controlling a person's behavior, does it not?
Yes, sir.
And you recall, and again, your unit houses maximum security, your unit houses death row, and the prosecutor asked you a question about, remember, she said, staff assaults, is that a big issue? And you said, no, it's not at this time. And that's in the unit that houses all these death row people and all these life, and 88 life without paroles, and all the rest of them maximum security inmates. Is that right?
Correct.
So if the truth is told, it's a safe environment.
It's safe for prison standards. It's safe. Yes, sir.
Well, sir, in fact, the Texas Department of Corrections in your unit is in fact safer than a lot of communities, is it not?
Yes, sir.
In fact, a person has greater risk of being killed in the free world than they do in a prison system, don't they?
Yes, sir.
I mean, and you talk about counterintuitive. I mean, you know that most people out here in the free world think that prison's just a horrible place where everybody's either committing a crime or fixing to commit a crime or committing an assault or fixing to commit one. And we know truthfully that that's not true, don't we?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you have the ability to prevent somebody as best you can from being in an environment and in having an opportunity to commit an act of criminal violence, don't you?
Yes.
Now, you cannot absolutely prevent it. I mean, we know that to be true, right?
Correct.
But the actual rate of that ever happening is so low that it's almost statistically negligible, isn't it?
Yes.
Behavior in the free world. Are you familiar with the studies regarding a person's behavior in the free world having no correlation to their behavior in the prison system?
No, not.
You've not ever, okay. I'm gonna ask you about that then. When you undertake the classification process, is behavior in the free world one of the factors that you consider?
We don't have a record of anyone's behavior in the free world.
Right, so that's not considered. You consider their institutional record and their jail record as two of the factors, correct?
Correct.
Some people don't have an institutional record, right?
Correct.
So if someone does come from another prison here in Texas, you would have the records already, correct?
Yes.
If someone came from Tennessee and you got the records and they showed no disciplinary problems at all during a prior incarceration, how would that impact your decision on classification?
It would be to the inmate's favor,
It would be in his favor. And why would that be in his favor?
because there's no record of violence, if that's the case.
Let's say that a person comes to you and you have an institutional record from another state that shows no records of infractions, no records of assaults. Let's say that hypothetically a person's been locked up for several years before he gets to your facility and he has absolutely no record of infractions, absolutely no records of assaults. Would his lack of assaults, lack of discipline, would that information be provided to you for purposes of classification?
Yes.
And what would occur under that hypothetical, if a person's never had an institutional history of discipline or assaultive conduct, what impact would that have on your classification process?
It would be to the inmate's favor. There would be no reason to restrict him.
And if that was true, then we would pretty much assume that he's going to come into the system as a G3 with all the restrictions that we've already spoken about, right?
Correct.
If there was a history, if there was some reason to look at that person and think that he was going to be an institutional problem, you could automatically bring him in at the level of ADSEG, couldn't you?
If he had a record, if there's a reason to do so, yes.
Right. And at ADSEG level, sir, that person is single cell, eating bread loaf, isn't he?
He's the same as, identical to death row.
I'm sorry?
They're identical to death row as far as how they're treated.
Okay. Well, what gets you the bread loaf?
If you've been assaulted, you get placed on food loaf it's only 7 days that we can put an inmate on food loaf. And that's everything that's on a tray that's been blended and baked with a gelatin substance to make it into a loaf.
And when people are on ADSEG, they've lost all their conveniences, haven't they?
They still make commissary, they still have property, but they don't have a job. They can't live with other inmates and recreate with other inmates.
Okay. Let's talk about visitation. Could you tell the jury, I'm sure you're familiar with all the studies regarding the behaviors of inmates that have a close family in visitation. Are you familiar with those studies?
Yes.
Could you tell this jury what those studies have taught you as the warden of this facility?
Inmates with a high level of family involvement, as far as support and visitation, have a lower propensity for violence or infractions.
Okay. Absolute correlation.
Correct.
So people that have, and the reason for that is because if they act up or do anything to act up, what happens to them?
They lose their visitation privileges.
Okay. So, and how far do you have to act up before you have actual restrictions to your visitations?
It can be done on a minor case.
Okay. And also, you can lose commissary.
Correct.
You can lose TV.
Correct.
You can lose recreation.
Correct.
There's all kinds of carrots that y'all have to dangle in front of somebody. But by statistics and by study, you're familiar with two things that we spoke about already. Number one being an age over 30 drops that propensity for any type of violence inside the prison system dramatically, correct?
Correct.
And if a person has a close-knit family with visitation, it drops it way lower, doesn't it?
Yes.
So then you can take those two factors and then you can figure in his institutional record, whether or not there's a lack of any infractions, disciplinary or assaultive conduct in a prior institution. You could add into the fact that that person's lack of disciplinary records, lack of assaultive conducts prior to coming to your facility. And those paint or would, in all effect, paint to you as an expert in this system a pretty good picture of what you're going to be dealing with, wouldn't it?
It's a good indicator, yes, sir.
And when we're talking about a differentiation between something that might be possible or something that's probable, you would agree with me, sir, anything's possible, correct?
Correct.
As the prosecutor said to you earlier, it could be that the best person in the world could do something terrible in the future. It's possible that something like that could happen, right?
Yes.
But in your experience and your training, you look at those factors that we know now to be the truth as opposed to what might be intuitive to people that are incorrectly intuitive to people. So when we look at all the factors, we get a better reading for what is more realistically probable as opposed to possible, don't we?
Yes.
And sir, even though it's my question and not the prosecutor's, I'm sure they're going to come back and have some more questions for you here in a minute and talk to you about all the scary stuff again to get everybody hair rising on their arms. But when we really get down to it, you run a tight ship, as do the rest of the wards in our community, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Travis, no good.
Yes, sir.
The only other thing that I wanted to ask you is, when we spoke earlier about the way you characterize, and I mean, you were just answering questions, but making it sound like everybody's just hanging out having a good time. You talked about when they might recreate on a yard, there could be as many as 200-300 folks on the yard at one time.
Yes.
And you said there's only one guard up on a picket, or how do you describe that?
So guys, pick it.
And the truth of the matter is, sir, that if that was some type of a problem, y'all wouldn't do it, would you?
But we would curtail them out, yes.
Well, I mean, absolutely, but when the prosecutor asks you the question and then says 300 people for just one guard, certainly if that was any kind of a problem for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, y'all just flat wouldn't do it, or you'd put more guards there, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir.
And the reason why you can put 300 people there with just one guard and a gas picket is because it's just really not a problem, is it?
If it becomes a problem, we have methods to deal with it.
And then that's what we're talking about. You got methods short of executing somebody to prevent them from being a future danger, don't you?
Yes, sir.
And that's just the truth, isn't it? That's all I got.
Judge Murphy?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, Ward Harris, I was not trying to leave the impression that TDCJ had untrained staff. I understand that you all do the best that you can. Train your officers as best as you can. My question is that even though TDCJ is a controlled environment, are you all currently understaffed?
Yes.
Okay, and understaffed so much that you have potentially one officer supervising up to 140 inmates at one time.
Correct.
Now, this age over 30 study in which the defense talked about, is 30 the average age, or is it above 30, do you know?
For a male, above the age of 30, the likelihood of them acting out violently and spontaneously, irrationally, drops significantly. It's something to do with testosterone and growing up, I guess, but for the most part, their likelihood, they become much more manageable at age 30,
Okay, you said violently and spontaneously.
spontaneously.
Okay, so that has nothing to do with planning a capital murder and committing it
No.
after the age of 31?
No,
So you're talking about just spontaneous reaction?
spontaneous reactions.
Nothing to do with stalking, preparation, watching, and actually committing a capital murder?
No, sir, no, ma'am, I wasn't attesting to that, just the likelihood of spontaneous violence.
Now, have there been, and have you heard of situations where you have had officers murdered while working at TDC?
Yes,
Okay? And was those offenders, and if you know, always offenders charged with violent offenses?
no. Not always.
And have you heard of, in your time at TDC, groups escaping from TDC?
Yes,
Okay? And were those groups of offenders always violent offenders?
no, they weren't. I'm sorry.
Were any of those individuals over the age of 30?
Yes,
And so, in this particular group of offenders that escaped, was
You
there...
just been approached.
And so, Warden Harris, the truth of the matter is that an offender would choose to do what the offender wants to do. Is that a fair statement?
yes,
Okay, regardless to what supervision they may have, regardless to what offense they may have committed, an offender chooses to do whatever they choose to do, and you all try to do the best to control the current situation.
yes,
And sometimes that control is more reactive versus proactive.
correct,
Okay, so basically, something occurs and you all try to figure out how to prevent it from occurring again.
correct.
Has there ever been a time during your training and experience where hostages have been taken?
Yes,
And in fact, is there a sign that is listed on the gates at pretty much all facilities that says no hostages beyond this point?
correct. Most of them do. Mine included.
And what does that mean?
Means that even if I were to be taken hostage, the moment I become a hostage, I'm no longer the warden. I have no authority. I'm not to be allowed through that point. I can't give anybody an order. I'm less than human. I'm a hostage, I'm a thing. And that our staff will not open that gate, will not allow me or an inmate to pass through there as long as I'm in that state.
Warden, I guess we're going to keep going back to trying to pull up the scary situation. The fact of the matter is, and you remember the prosecutor's question to you just a moment ago about that has nothing to do with whether someone was planned to do a murder or something like that. Do you remember that question?
Yes.
And you said, well, that might be true. Well, the fact is, the studies that we've talked about show that there's absolutely zero correlation between the crime that they committed and their likelihood to commit violence. Whether it was a planned murder, multiple murders, depraved murders, murders of children. It matters not what the offender was convicted of in regards to their propensity for violence. Isn't that true?
Correct.
So we can keep trying to pull something up and saying, isn't this possible? Isn't this possible? And we're just not talking, we're talking apples and oranges, aren't we? Because you know what the studies have shown, and you know what happens in reality in your system.
Is that a question?
I'm asking you, is that not true?
Yes.
And the prison system is very good at controlling the behavior of each individual, is it not?
We try to do it. We do our best, yes, sir.